Assalamu alaikum and good evening. Welcome to another episode of the Classics Show. I am your host, Shabnam Riaz. Well, hoping that you're having a great Sunday evening and you've had a great weekend as well. And from tomorrow, you know, that Monday feeling, back to work, back to school, all those activities, another week of being busy, and then you have the weekend to look forward to. What better way to have you spend your weekend, but then watching us on the Classics Show? And I'm sure, you know, you're going to find this a really interesting program because we've got a fascinating topic. The topic is the importance of poets in society. Why do we have poetry? Why do we have poets? What inspires a poet to write a poem? And when do words come together, link together as a chain of poetry? We're going to have this discussion with our guest who's in the studio today. We're very happy to have Mr. Shaheer Ellahi, who has a PhD in anthropology, and you're an assistant professor at Bahria University and also a poet in 4 languages. Thank you very much for joining us here today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Our pleasure. Okay, Shaheer, you know, if we start, the topic of today's program is very, very interesting.
It is.
And there is just so much to examine, to analyze, to understand. So many things we're not aware of, even being a poet yourself or me myself. So many things that are being done subconsciously. So if I start this question with, what is a word to a poet?
Well, very, very interesting. Look, word is in which we all humans live in. And it has been commonly said that the word was the first thing that God produced and gave to humans. But the most important thing about word is that the word is made up of 3 attributes. Word is a sound for a poet. You would always find this fascinating thing about poets, that they would allow a word to be more soundful, make a word more melodious or grotesque at times. The other important attribute, or something which I would say an attire of a word, is the imagery that it produces. Every word may be watchable to people, may bring more scenes to my mind or to my brain. So for a poet, a word is not just a word. It is a sound, number 1. 2, it is an image. Image that may bring something which is unseen, which cannot be seen, or may bring thousands meanings to me through those imaginations or imaginative pictures. And the last and the most important aspect of word is to bring meaning to the purpose of your life. Meaning to breathe, meaning to be more purposeful, meaning to dig within, meaning to close or shut your eyes and see within, to create and construct a universe within, which is more powerful, which is actually the macrocosm, not the microcosm itself. So for me, word is an entirely different genre when it comes to poet. When they touch a word, they make that word timeless or spaceless. Look, we have been reading and we have been studying and observing a lot of poets. They are just deathless. Why? Because the word in which we live and cry were given by them. We're indebted.
Yeah.
For example, Shakespeare or D.H. Lawrence. Or when we come to Persian tradition, we've got so many names. We've got Urfi, Naziri, Hafiz Shiraz, Rumi. Then we come to our own tradition. We've got Mir, Ghalib, Iqbal, Aurangabadi, Wali Dakhni, and you so many names.
Yeah.
What they're famous for, that they give you the same word that you use every day, but they elevate that word and brings that divinity, that serenity, that beautiful fragrance to that word, that you start living in it.
That's
right?
so true.
And the most important aspect of word is that it bites you. it, it keeps on inspiring you. It keeps on aching in your heart, making you more humane, making you to live your life at a superlative level, not just on a common level where everyone lives. For example, when we say a word is a sound, poets make certain sounds. For example, melodious sounds. You would find Faz Ahmad Faz's poetry is full of different melodious sounds. Though his content is revolutionary, but his sounds are very melodious. On the other hand, you find Iqbal, very melodious, but can be very grotesque at times, right? He would just add a sound or a voice in a word that would may live forever within you, or may start echo within you, right? So the sound of the word creates certain valleys within you, may take you to certain paths within you, within your own self. And then we come to imagination, the imagery. The poets are priceless in this manner that they create creative imagination, or I must say visual dynamism. They create characters. For example, you yourself is a poet or a poetess. In that manner, what we do is we create a character in our imagination, and then we make them to move, sit, die, relive. This entire phenomenon is known as visual dynamism. So the poets have this beautiful imagination skill, and through the lens of the poet we see a new universe. And through the last aspect of the word, which is to bring meaning, to install new meanings in the word. Look, just like humans, words can die.
Yeah.
Words can outlive.
They
Words
become
can
immortal.
grow old. Yeah.
Yeah.
What poets do to word is that they keep on installing new meanings in the word.
So true.
So they may keep on carrying the load of your emotions.
True.
Right? Because we keep on moving. So for me, word, for poets, a word in itself is something which is the cornerstone of humanity.
Absolutely.
Without word, we are nothing.
So true.
We live in word. For example, whatever is divine or spiritual or whatever is passionate comes to me through a word. Look, I cannot even think of an emotion without a word.
True.
Word is so powerful. For example,
yeah.
sorry to cut you, a baby would have an imagination of the house, but that imagination needs to offload itself on a word. That is exactly why we create a word.
Isn't that the most beautiful part of a baby growing up?
Oh,
When
yes.
they're learning the language.
Yes.
Because the parents are sort of like, they cannot wait until their child to communicate with them. So when the baby says the first word, especially if it's mama
Yes.
or dada, papa, whatever it is such an overwhelming feeling.
It is.
Because as you said, the speaking is the connection.
True, it is.
And so the words are forming this connection. In fact, they're the sort of the gates and the doorways to a mystical world.
True, it is. Very, very, very fantastically put, actually.
Yeah, and you as well, the way you've described it, it's fantastic. Now tell me, a person who hasn't realized they're a poet and they're using words and they're writing them down, who's going to tell them that, okay, this is poetry?
One, the construction of the sentence, the construction, the versification itself would tell that person that this something which has been written by me is different from what I write on laptop or computer every day. One. The construction of the sentences would itself identify itself to me that this is something different that I have produced. Two, that those sentences would create an inspiration. They may be more audible to others. Whatever I'm feeling may be felt by others through those sentences. That's what makes me a poet. When whatever I write with my feeling and I'm able to transform that feeling in my words, and somebody picks that word and that feeling goes through those words and may transform into a new feeling. That is the entire process of becoming a poet.
That's sort of like the flow of electricity, isn't it?
It is exactly like this. Look,
Yeah.
unless I am unable to touch through my words, unless my words are not touching, I cannot qualify to be a poet. Aesthetically, or in a grotesque manner, in a revolutionary manner, in an ideologically manner, in a spiritual manner, in a divine manner, or whatever it may be. But the construction of the sentence or the verse should be in a fashion or manner that may touch or create melody or fragrance that may be. For example, I see a village and I write something about it. It's a creative village imagination in my mind. I'm a poet if I can show you the same imagery through my verses. The entire process of versification makes me a poet if I'm able to transform that village into your mind. For example, if I'm feeling of my mother, whom I love so much or dearly, and if I write down in words and those words may touch you, this certainly means that this entire experience is poetical.
Right.
Right? So the most important experience one can have is the experience of being a poet. Poetical experience is the mother of all experiences. That is exactly why.
Having said all that,
Yeah.
you know, and sort of realizing the weight of poetry and poems and the process that leads up to it, are poets being recognized then for this endeavor? I mean, we have our classics, we've read through them, we've had such great, big names, as you've said, and they are timeless. But
Yeah.
today, nowadays, are we looking after our poets as we should be? Are we understanding what they're actually doing?
Shabnam, this is very sad. True, it is indeed a very, very sad question, because I believe more we need scientists or scholars or professors or engineers. We need somebody to engineer our heart.
Oh, beautiful.
And the engineers
Beautifully
of
said.
the heart, or the scholars of the heart, are
Absolutely.
nonetheless but poets. But somehow we are unable to recognize the importance of poets within our own society. And I don't know why. Then we,
And we have such a legacy.
of
So
course,
then,
yes.
why is that? Why are we allowing this to happen? What's going wrong? What should we be doing about it?
I think it's just being too 9 to 5 corporate, very commercial, capitalistic, market-based environment in which we live. We hardly get time to buy a book and make myself more human at the end of the day. Because
So
when you
true.
read poetry, you make a step ahead in becoming a human. Right? For
Absolutely.
example, I don't know why, but there is this dire need. Look, if I'm a soldier or a police officer or a professor or a manager, end of the day, I need something that may quench the thirst of the meaning of life that comes from the poet. The poet reads the situation, the scenario of the society. And it so beautifully then depicts in words that are more meaningful to me. That is exactly why I am a big proponent of this phenomenon that we must recognize poets. We should call them more often in universities, in colleges, in
As
schools.
speakers, as motivating, sharing their poetry,
Oh,
and then
yes.
telling the listeners and the audience about the feelings that they go through and what they hope that other people have, also been able to experience. Because it's art, it's word art.
Very rightly said. You used a beautiful word, feeling. Look, with this market-based behavior, we are becoming more feelingless.
True. Robotic.
Yes, robotic, yes. Entirely mechanized robotic beings, right? What makes us more human beings or poetical beings are poets. And we still have that legacy that we can linger on to. They can
Absolutely.
rescue them. Look, in 2050, according to certain researches, since I have a background of medical anthropology, I've read a lot of articles that with time, humans would be fighting few disorders, diseases, and who imagine are going to somehow eradicate the entire humanity, maybe in few centuries. Stress,
Oh, stress, yes.
depression, anxiety, loneliness. My loneliness is
Those are-
meaningful
Yeah.
when I read poetry. It is, I was never scared of being alone because we used to read poetry. We
So
are so
true.
scared of being alone. We are frightened to cry in front of people. Why? Because we don't recognize poets.
And as you're talking about loneliness, you know, there's a concept that we have to be very clear about. Loneliness is not about the amount of people you are socializing with,
True.
the amount of friends you may be having. It's about the feeling you have from yourself. You know, you may be in a whole crowd and you may be lonely.
Well,
It's
beautifully said.
detachment. Who are
Yes.
you attached with? So we'll come back to the program and carry on with this discussion as well. Don't change the channel. We'll be back soon. Welcome back to the program. We're talking about the importance of poets in society. And Shaheer, just before we went for the break, we were talking about loneliness and poetry, how that is actually a balm, a soothing
Yes.
ointment to loneliness. Tell us more about that.
I see it from another angle, which is that loneliness about 200 years back was not considered as something, as a suffering or a sorrow, or maybe seen as something which is very frightening, right? This modern man has this dilemma that he or she is scared of being alone. Poets, they bring that loneliness to you, which is more meaningful, sorrowful, but yet purposeful, right? So for me, it is very important to fight the modern day anxiety or depression or loneliness with the help of poetry. You're not going to believe this. The Sufis, about 200 to 300 years back, the mystics in Islam, they used to treat a lot of people going through depression or anxiety or other mental disorders with the help of a poet. Hazrat Rumi Rahmatullah alayh.
Yes.
The use of his divan known as Shams, Diwan-e-Shams, and his Masnavi, which is still as Quran Zaban Pahlwi, the translation of Quran in Persian language. So imagine how powerful poets can be. They can make your loneliness more purposeful.
And what is so interesting here, having said that,
Yeah.
is that Rumi is one of the best-selling poets in the United States.
It is still.
That is
yes.
saying a lot.
Yes.
So what you're seeking is somebody who can understand that
Yes.
and understand what you're feeling inside. So that says so much about what the great Sufi writers have written.
That is exactly why not just the poets. There are different genres within poetry. And they cater to different classes, different mindsets. Look, you would always find an audience of Shakespeare,
Yeah.
but always somebody who's seeking more of humanity would, jump into the waves of Rumi. And Rumi itself is so powerful that he's inevitable to modern humanity. You find Rumi as the most translated poet in the world. Why? because it treats you at the most virgin point of your humanity. The most important form, feeling of your humanity, where you actually start feeling and living like a human. No corporate, commercial, cosmetic human being is allowed to walk or go through Rumi's poetry. It is the one who's more human or humane or wants to be a human being is allowed to go through the poetry of Rumi. That's what makes Rumi one of the most powerful poets in the world, along with Shakespeare and Goethe and Homer
Absolutely.
and others.
In other words, poetry is stopping man from becoming a machine.
Oh, beautifully said, yes. Look, we are becoming mechanical beings. It is very important to transform ourselves into poetical beings. Right? End of the day, I need to talk to my daughter. I need to have food, and that food may taste delicious to me. It would remain tasteless unless I don't have that little poet within me.
Right.
There is this dire need to smell the real red rose, not the cosmetic ones.
True.
Unless,
True.
if I am not drenched in these feelings, I won't be able to live on the pedestal of humanity. That's what I believe.
So
That is
true.
exactly why Rumi used different icons and metaphors and symbols that they are timeless, spaceless. Every human being still living on this planet can somehow conceive or perceive those symbols. The symbol of a flute, sound, the melody within. That what the son of Rumi said, that my father was like hamchu charh gardan shad. My father used to dance like if the clouds or the sky has come down on this earth.
How beautiful.
Imagine
How beautiful.
the amount of spiritual earthquake you bring to your own self.
So
that
true.
it brings you back to
So
humanity.
true. And as we're talking about this, this is a really interesting part of today's program. Those writers and those poets and the great names that we're mentioning, they spent a lot of time in silence,
Oh, yes.
in solitude,
Oh,
in
yes.
thought, in reflection, in thinking about so many deep issues. If we are so busy, if we're busy, in life, and then we're busy with gadgets, with technology, with social media, how much time are we giving ourselves?
And most importantly, adding to your question, it's not that we're not giving time to ourselves. We're actually losing of becoming humans. And we are transforming into a generation of mechanical beings.
Yeah.
And it is going to be inevitable in next century or so. That is exactly why very, very important to have more poets
Yeah.
in a society that may give you a greater meaning of life. Words that we use now are a mere discourse of capitalistic society. Look what we talk about every day: GDP, dollars, pounds, market, downfall, uplift. Is that it? Breaking news, making news, is that it? No, humans are way greater than this language. The entire capitalistic commercial market discourse has destroyed the basic ingredient of being poetical, right? So that is exactly why silence or solitude bites us. It used to be so productive. I've seen my grandparents, they used to sit silently and meditate and used to produce a lot of poetry or maybe something which is more wisdomatic.
So what are we scared of when we think of being alone or loneliness? What are we scared of?
Our own selves.
The answers that we're going to get, or the questions we're going to ask
Our own
ourselves?
selves.
What is it?
I don't know why, but our own selves. We have constructed our own selves as ugly beings. It is only the poets that shows you the mirror of the beauty. And we call it in poetical language the beautified causation. It gives you the cause and effect of beauty. The end of the day, the end product of becoming human is not to be a corporate being, but to become a moral being. Right? So, what scares me the most is my own ugliness.
Beautiful.
The poetry transforms that ugliness into the beauty of my own self. First, I must learn to love my own self.
And only then I'll be capable of loving
Of
anyone
loving
else.
other and treating others.
Or
If
having
I'm,
other people love us.
yes. If I'm unable to cultivate love from my own soul, how will I share it to others? The cultivation of the love comes from the tools of poetry.
How beautiful.
That is exactly why since centuries,
Wonderful.
humans have been writing poetry. And you're not going to believe this, according to anthropologists, since thousands of years, humans have been expressing their deepmost thoughts in the versification, in poetry, in the language of poetry, because that means a lot to us, to all of us. For example, if I would say something in a hodgepodge sentence, may not sound poetical, but if I may say something which is very simple, but in the form of versification or
And
a
it just
poetry,
connects.
it connects you
And it's
immediately.
immortal. Yes,
The
absolutely true.
spontaneity of poetry makes us more alert towards humanity.
Right. That's fantastic conversation, and we're going to get back to that very soon. Right now, we're going to go for a break. Don't change the channel. Welcome back to the program. We're having a fantastic discussion. We're talking about poets, poetry. What can a poem do for you? What are poets' contribution to society? And this is something that has been going on for so many years. And sometimes we are, oblivious to the fact of the power that poetry holds. And, I wanted to ask you that, considering our region of the world and the legacy that we've had, so many great names associated with poetry, how do we ensure that we're carrying on with that tradition?
Very, very hard question, because the legends that we have produced, both in Persian and Urdu tradition, are fantastically, mesmerizingly huge names. For example, what if I describe the entire Persian tradition into three basic schools, known as Sabke Khurasani, Sabke Iraqi, and Sabke Hindi. The Khurasani school, the Iraqi school, and the subcontinental school. Just within one school, you have names that they are so fantastic that you cannot eliminate them from top 10 list of the world, right? They're always there. For example, we have Foghani Shirazi, we've got Naziri Urfi, Saib, Bedil, Jalal Asir, Shaukat Bukhari, and then you have this, one of the most wonderful poets the world has ever produced, Mirza Abdul Qadir Bedil, the most philosophical poet of the world. And then we have Amir Khosraw, we have Mir Taqi Mir, Ghalib, Iqbal, and then we have Siraj Aurangabadi, Wali Dakni, and I've got so many big names. And somehow, since Faiz, John, Munir Niazi, and so many other fantastic names have passed away, there is this huge vacuum. And there is this legacy that still needs to be carried on. But somehow, with the vanishing of our language, with the erosion of our language, we are unable to produce our thoughts in our own language. We are borrowing a foreign language to offload our thoughts.
So we're having a clash.
Yes, that is exactly why we're unable to produce,
Express in that way.
Yes, we're unable to express genuinely and produce something which is indigenous
and straight from the heart.
Exactly. For example, Michel Foucault, wonderful postmodern anthropologist, once said that this modern world has created man as a bioproduct. We live at the biological level. Poets, they make us poetical product. We live at the
Beautiful.
poetical passion. For example, Rumi once said in Diwan-e Shams, Dila humaye visali bepar chira na pari, tora kise na shanasad na admi na pari. O heart, you're not from the fantasy world or nor from the world of this dust. You need to learn your own seat, the actual seat of the heart, which is the carrier of intuition, wisdom, knowledge, and at times when it becomes the prophet, it becomes the heart of the revelation, right?
Beautiful.
So you need to bring that. And it was also produced as a legacy by Iqbal. तेरे ज़मीर पे जब तक न हो नज़ूले किताब, गिरा कुशा है न राज़ी न साहिबे किशाफ. You need to produce that same feeling, so you may touch with that poet and become a poetical product. And that's what Rumi once said. When I came to love, I'm ashamed of all that I've ever said about love.
Oh,
Coming to
beautiful, isn't
love
it?
itself
Yeah.
brings so much embarrassment that you have ever said about love.
You know, Shaheer, I have this question, but when we're talking about these amazing personalities, we also, you know, the poets of today, of the modern times, they need to live as poets. They need that nurturing environment. I mean, if they're trapped in a 9-to-5 job and trapped in, you know, the rat race and keeping up with the Joneses and all the dilemmas that go along with modern living, where is that nurturing going to come from?
Yes, a very, very important question. I'm still trying to find that nursery where to institutionalize it, how to bring them up, because somehow a lot of people said that poetry is innate. You are born as a poet. And some would say that no, you can polish your skill as a poet.
Can anyone become a poet?
Yes, if you go through an episode, not a traumatizing episode, but an episode which is very touching, or losing someone who's very dear to you, may make your expressions more poetical, right? That is exactly why we see a lot of people who go through mental disorders are people who are very sensitive. The sensitivity, what makes you a poet, needs internal flowering, and that flowering needs water, water of sensitivity, hopefulness, something which can be shared, collective consciousness. And somehow in this world where we live as different personalities, right? And poets are somehow very composed. They cannot live as different personalities, right? So somehow I believe that poet is a full-time job.
Isn't it a bit of a, it's emotionally exhausting.
It is. It can be, look.
Sometimes you want to turn that tap off, that water of sensitivity.
Yes.
Sometimes it just gets to be too much.
Yeah, I don't know why it's common, because we both at least can relate, and in audience people who express poetry, they can also relate with it, that somehow this sensitivity, it handcuffs you at times, it suffocates you, because in this modern age there is so much sorrow, and it's so explicit and visible. There is so much mechanical humanity in this world that your sensitivity cries to it, and you just cannot shut your eyes to it, or your heart to it.
Yeah,
it's
too much
at times.
exposure.
And even then, with this scarcity of humanity, it is such a shame that we're unable to produce a high-statured poet. Look, poets are born in two ways. One, when you have too much scarcity, or when there is too much of affluence, right? When you have everything, but you still don't have the meaning of life, you become a poet. And when you don't have nothing, you make something out of it, you become a poet. So both extremes, the both borders of human perceptions actually touches you to become a poet, or at least appreciate a poet. That is exactly why you hardly find in this modern architect, in this modern lifestyle, people going to bed or sleeping with a poetry book, or novels or fiction. It's all important, because literature constructs me within. The internal architect is more important. The internal flowering, the internal audition, the internal scenery, the internal universe is more important for me as a human, because end of the day, I live with myself, and this body is not just mere skin and bones. When you go deep from the skin, you find it's not just blood. There is something else that
Flowing
rushes
in
in our veins,
True.
emotions,
Beautiful.
feelings.
Yes, so true.
And the poets, they give you words, and they rescue you and make you more human at the end of the day. And I appreciate and promote that we should, at all levels, at all local languages, must propel the intensity of becoming poets, and we must appreciate them.
Beautiful.
People find poets useless because we often stigmatize them because they don't do anything other than poetry. For example, Shiv Kumar Batalvi, a famous Punjabi poet, and he passed away only at the age of 35. And he won one of the most highest award, Indian literary award, at the age of 27.
Imagine.
What made him that miraculous personality?
Absolutely.
And same is the case with so many other people we have produced here in our own land. Unless I don't speak or talk or express in my own language, I won't be able to relate with my own people.
That is so
Real
true.
development is to talk in the language which is
Coming
the language of the
down
heart
to
of the people.
Grassroots, absolutely. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but Shaheer, thank you so much for being such a fantastic guest, and the content of today's show has been amazing. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much for inviting me, having me.
Thank you for being here. Okay, and with that, we come to the end of today's program. What a fascinating discussion. I certainly enjoyed it. Why become a poet? Why do we need poets? What has been their contribution to society to make us human again? So think about that today, and do pick up a book of poetry that you can keep next to you and read before you go to bed, and it will enrich you in so many ways. So until next week, stay happy. Bye-bye.